Let's just start with Alex Smith because, John, you got to watch him play. What were your impressions in the fact that he made the 53-man roster?
Couple of things. One, when you watch him, it's not like you're sitting there watching him thinking, "Oh, this guy is coming off this thing." You knew it because we were watching him, but you weren't always just seeing that he's not like he's running out there limping and doing all these things where it's like, oh, it wasn't Robert Griffin III against Seattle, right? And so, you could see a path to him getting on. The problem was you never saw him in situations that they kept saying they wanted to see him, as in full team, 11 on 11, full pads. And not that they're going to sit there and tackle people, but you're going a little bit harder, and so there's a lot more of a quote-unquote mess in the pocket that he's going to have to avoid. We didn't see that, but you did see signs that, like, okay, this guy can still do X, Y, or Z. Did not look like the same guy as far as, the mobility he used to have.
Right.
But he certainly looked like he could, that he had some life in that game a little bit. So, but I was still, I wouldn't say I was surprised that he made it, but I still thought, and I do believe going into last week that the option for him would have been more IR than anything. But
Right.
The problem is he's not, in his mind too, he's not injured. It's either put me on or don't.
Right. And then where does he stand? I assume he's third at this point on the depth chart.
Yeah, they talked about that.
And Ron Rivera said the other day that he's still rusty, and he's barely been in again at the last. In the time that we watched practice, he never did the full pad 11 on 11. He did that last week after he had a meeting with Rivera, and then after he had another meeting with Ken Zampese and Scott Turner, and then the next day did a full pad 11 on 11. So point is, that's the first time. I don't think you're going to go from that to being a number two guy that fast. So my sense would be that it would be a third guy for a little while and just give him a chance to further continue getting back to where they feel he needs to be a number two. And I'll be honest, I don't think certainly when camp started, I don't think this is the result that many people probably expected.
Right.
Do you feel like he made the roster because Ron and Scott Turner just feel comfortable with an experienced guy to help the two young guys, or do you think that he made the roster because they think eventually he could be the number two and they feel safer with him as a backup than Kyle Allen?
It's kind of hard to say, but I would say that I think it's as much about that he can still offer something, and to both young quarterbacks. And it's funny because there was a mic'd up segment the other day from the stadium practice last week, and I think it was on NBC Sports Washington. They do the mic'd up stuff, and shout out Mitch Tischler. But during that segment, you could hear some of the things he was talking about with Dwayne Haskins, and there was a play where he threw an interception in there, and you could hear the stuff that Alex would go over there and talk to him about is it's stuff where we say this is why it's good to have a guy like that around, and Haskins does listen to him. So I think there's a benefit to that. I don't think that's the only reason. I think you have to legitimately say, was he one of the best 53 guys in camp? And especially at that position, I think you're going to want to keep more this year. So I think it's as much he's a good, I don't want to say insurance policy because we don't know where he'll really be or where they'll be, but I think this year you want to have as many quarterbacks as possible. He knows the offense. They're very comfortable with what he knows, and I think the other parts that he adds are a really good thing for them in that quarterback room.
I think you just touched on it real quick. I wonder if part of the reason why they didn't keep him also is because of COVID. And you never know. I mean, Haskins could pop, and then now you got nothing.
Well,
right?
I think that's also right, and I think that's also why Steven Montez was placed on the practice squad. So they have 4 quarterbacks around this year. Now the practice squads are deeper this year because you can keep the 16 and 17 if you have the international player like they do. So that gives you that ability, and you do need to keep as many as possible for that reason. Now, what I'll be curious to hear is what they plan to do with Montez for example, like does he sit in on Zoom meetings or does he go to practice, do all that stuff, and then have the meetings elsewhere so he's not in a room with
Right.
everybody in case something happens to them. I think you have to have those kind of contingency plans, and I think the Jets kept 5 quarterbacks for that reason. So, I don't know what all these other teams did with that, but I know like that has to be a part of it. And I think also with Montez, there were things enough that they liked where you want to keep him around just in case, because you never know, and you have that extra spot. And with a quarterback, if you kind of like something about them, why not? See where it goes. And with an expanded practice squad, it gives you that ability. But COVID also adds the extra layer to it.
John, I was telling the boys earlier before you came on that I'm just intrigued. I can't believe that he made it back. It's the greatest sports comeback that I've ever seen. And I'm intrigued just as a fan. I'm not rooting for Dwayne to fail. But, just maybe in mop-up duty, just to kind of complete that comeback for me, I want to see him play in a game. I really do. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen, and maybe he's just going to hand off when he does get in the game, but I just want to see it.
I think that would be remarkable. And I'm obviously if Dwayne Haskins does his job, the only way Alex gets in there is either through an injury or through, mop-up duty, like you said, and it would be a remarkable capper. I agree. And, there's been so much that's happened in this organization the last couple months that this is one of the best comeback stories ever, and it keeps getting obscured by other things. And it's a shame because what he's doing is phenomenal. And the sad part of it is, let's say he does get into a game this year, and he should be going into a stadium that gives him a standing ovation, and coming off to that, and you're not going to get that. But I don't know that he cares about. He doesn't. Knowing him, I don't think he could care about that. I just think for fans it would be nice. And again, knowing him a little bit and his personality, I think just him going out there and his teammates feeling that kind of appreciation or showing that kind of appreciation would be more than enough for him. But I think it would be cool. I don't know that we'll see it, but I think it would be a pretty cool moment. And that's been one of the things that's been again through all this craziness of the summer. That's been a very pleasing story to cover because of where he was, where you thought he would be, and where he's at now. It's remarkable.
We're joined by John Keim from ESPN and ESPN.com. John, are we looking at a Terry McLaurin version 2.0 with Antonio Gibson now that there's no Geist in the backfield? Adrian Peterson departs. He was released, signs with the Lions. Or is it going to be more of a mix with guys like McKissick and Barber, or is Gibson clearly the lead back here?
Well, clearly it's hard to say because I know they still want to use a lot of guys, and they will use a lot of two-back sets, and that's with Gibson McKissick. It could be Barber McKissick, Barber and Gibson, because they all have that ability to help in both the run and the pass, especially McKissick, or especially Gibson in that regard. And then I think McKissick, because those two have receiver backgrounds. So you can put them in spots and ask them to run receiver-type routes that you can't do with other running backs. So that opens up the offense. So I do think that Gibson is the guy to watch in all of this. The hard part for us is that without a preseason game, you really don't know all that he can do. And, there are times where you see things out of a running back.
Uh-oh, sounds like we just lost him.
I was hoping that was just on my end. Darn it. Sounds like on the overall thing. See if you get John
kind
back.
of telling, though, if you saw some of Peterson's quotes after he was released talking about Gibson.
He was raving about it.
Oh, he said the system really fits him. I feel like I can do that pony style, too, more as a receiving back. We were all working on it, but they really want one main guy to do it, and they drafted Gibson for it.
Is Drab or Darius, is John Keim on a Comrex as well? Like, did his Comrex just go out? By the way, Keim is going to be on our show every Monday at
awesome.
7 o'clock following Washington football team games. So we're going to have John Keim on, and we're going to have Pro Football Focus on with us every Tuesday?
Nice.
At 9 o'clock. So we're going to have Pro Football Focus Tuesdays, but John Keim on Mondays during the season. John, do you have like a Comrex there? What's going on?
I don't listen. I'm out in the country. Stuff happens. I don't know.
You're a country squire out there, John.
Apparently he's got a landline. He's got an old-fashioned landline, and that's happening.
It's an internet-based line.
Okay.
So So that's part of what it is. And like I said, out here, it's like, cow sneezes and the internet can go out. So,
so you were talking about the versatile running backs.
Right.
That's affected by the line. Let's get to the line because, and again, it's tough to see without a preseason, but particularly the left side, we don't have much confidence and faith. What can we expect against the Eagles on Sunday?
I don't know because they are young. And, I like Wes Martin at left guard. I liked him last year coming out of camp. I felt like he played with a little bit of an attitude when he blocked and all that. So I always liked that. But he and Jaron Christian have combined for I want to say it's 7 starts in the NFL. That's asking a lot to go out there and then to mesh right away when you're facing a pretty good front like Philly has. And, the hard part is, how do they handle stunts and different looks? And that's if you have Moses and Sheriff on the other side, I mean, they've worked together for a while. They know how the other is going to react to a certain look. You don't know that here. And so I think that's a big question to me. And again, I go back to these last preseason games that you didn't get that chance to see. Just like I don't know if I got this point across before I lost you guys, but with Gibson, the same thing. With running backs, you sometimes see things in practice, but it's then you get into a preseason game, it's oh, okay, it's not what I thought. Well, you don't know. I think with Gibson, I like him. I think some of the questions I have with him is, will he run too upright sometimes? But I think he's got explosiveness. I also think going to, when we talk about the run game, it's not like they're just going to always line it up and just try and pound you. There's going to be a lot of misdirection with it, so that can help the line too. When you had Kyle Shanahan in that group, it's not like his lines were always the best. They just ran a run game that meant that you didn't have to, that you could fool a team sometimes with a look, or the lineman only had to, obstruct a guy more than just drive a guy. So I think there are some things they can do with this run game, the way they want to do with the jet action one way, coming back another, getting the defense to move their eyes a little bit or fool their eyes and create openings. So that's how they're going to try and help it too. But I do have concerns about that left side simply because they're young and inexperienced. I think that's definitely something that you have to watch.
John,
how do you feel, real quick, how do you feel about the expectations of the defense in general?
I like it. I mean, I think that front should be really good, like everybody would expect. I know that there's some excitement, too, about their linebackers and just the versatility they have. And, with Cole Holcomb, Thomas Davis, Sean Dion Hamilton looked pretty good when they got the pads on. Bostic they like in the middle. So, and Kevin Pierre-Louis, they really seem to like. And so I think, and Kaliki Hudson as a special teams guy. So I think there's some parts that they like there. The corners, before we don't know yet what Kendall Fuller is going to do Sunday. He hasn't practiced in more than a week or so. And so I think if he's out there, that makes them better. If not, then Jimmy Moreland goes in the slot. And I like him, but he is still young, and the slot is a harder spot to cover. So I was going to say the corner depth or the corners were pretty good throughout camp. But you didn't know, again, preseason games. You didn't know, was that because the guys are covering are just whatever, or is it because that they were really looking good? And I think they felt like they were looking good. So I think there's definitely some reasons for optimism. Apke looked better, but again, practice. So let's see it in the game. But there were some signs that you say, okay, this could be pretty good. And I also think, too, the other key here is it's not just always about the talent. And, what happened the last couple of years, for too many years here, is that guys would be confused on the field. And so the communication comes from, first of all, guys knowing each other. That's something that's going to take some time here, I think, but also from, do they know the defense? So do you have too many rules in there or too many, things in there that can confuse a guy based on the looks? I think that's been trimmed down a little bit. That's what players will say. So we'll see how much that helps. But I think that's another thing under Jack Del Rio that you can watch. That I think that's something that they feel can help them. But listen, it all starts at that front. And if Chase Young is getting after guys, that defense will look a lot better.
Yeah. Hey, John, I know we got to run, but in 30 seconds, I don't know if you like to be put on the spot, but we've all gone around a million times and tried to predict record. Some people have them as the worst team in football this year or competing for it. I feel like this team could win 6 games, but I'm biased. I'm a homer. Can you give us a rough guesstimate on wins? Nobody knows,
Yeah,
but I'd love to hear what your sense is.
Yeah, I'm in that 5 to 6 range, and I think I had them at 6 and 10. We had our preview out, so I would just go with that.
Yeah.
And part of that, like, you know, I hate those things because you never know, but I do think like there's a lot of like people look at what they were last year in the chaos, but I see, you know, with Rivera, what you hear from the players is they like the approach he's taken. I think the way he's running things, I think definitely helps stabilize for them and gives them more confidence. I think that helps. I also think that defense will be pretty good. Question is, what will the offense do? That's the big question. How will Haskins progress? I think, to me, you know, I could see a slow start. If they finish strong, I think then I think it's a good season for them, given all the challenges that you have in a pandemic-type year.
Right.
For them to be good, I think that would be a strong finish would be a really good start, because I really think this is about laying a foundation for the next 5 years.